that was my intention, what actually happened? So what was the impact that I did have? Did it match my intention, or was it quite different? And if it didn't match, let me understand why. And it can lend ourselves to situations which can be very unpleasant. We might think that somebody's not in support of me because I'm not hearing from them, but we haven't actually got additional data to understand I'm not hearing from them because they've been unwell. They haven't been online. It's not that they're, ghosting me or not wanting to interact with me. So I might be taking myself to automatic negative thoughts and building up responses to those, as opposed to making more inquiries and testing my assumptions.
You have been very passionate about baking and cooking.
Look, I love having family around. I've got, two young men who are my sons who've grown up quickly and they've got incredible appetites. And so I like to bake, and I also like to be in the garden.
Hi, Corinne. Thank you so much for joining me on this show, Moments with Masters.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Corinne, before we dive into the conversation on leadership coaching and digging into your experiences of leadership coaching and about your book, I would actually want to start by reading your profile, your bio for our audience. Corinne is a professional certified executive coach and author of Be Your Own Leadership Coach, Self-Coaching Strategies to Lead Your Way, and is passionate about supporting leaders to be their best selves. She has enjoyed a 30-plus year career in professional services with 23 years as a partner of Deloitte, and brings a depth of understanding of the challenges which leaders face. With over 2,000 one-on-one coaching hours, Corinne has a unique perspective of the intersection of coaching psychology and lived leadership experience, which enhances her engagement with those she coaches. She acts in service to their success by drawing on the field of evidence-based coaching psychology obtained through her Master of Science in Coaching Psychology. Corinne has designed and implemented the coaching program for women partners of Deloitte, where since 2016, she coaches senior women leaders in support of having long-lasting, sustainable careers. In a voluntary capacity, she coaches clients of not-for-profit, Dress for Success, and senior leaders as clients of the social enterprise Bambuddha Group. Corinne is a passionate thought leader and is actively involved within the coaching communities of Asia Pacific. She is a partner faculty member of Deloitte University Asia Pacific, where she co-facilitates leadership programs for senior leaders within the region. She has also been a steering committee member of the Institute of Coaching Asia Pacific Roundtable Series and was an evaluator of the International Coaching Federation's PRISM Awards, which honored organizations globally for exceptional coaching programs. Well, based in Sydney, Australia, Corinne is known for baking delicious honey cakes. Her love of sweet treats extends to her love of sharing interesting thought leadership. She has recently authored a book chapter on mental toughness published in the UK. Corinne, thank you so much for joining us on this show, Moments with Masters, and you are the master of the day.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you for that long introduction.
Corinne, the first question, before we dive into the understanding of your experience and your books and your experience of intersection of your experience of coaching psychology as well as lived leadership experience, when did it all begin, and what interested you in leadership coaching?
Well, it began a while ago now. I've been, as you said, in professional services for a very long time. And I was very fortunate to be put onto my own leadership program towards executive roles. And whilst I was on that program, I was presented with a coach. I hadn't had a coach before. I hadn't really understood the difference between coaching and mentoring. And it was the first time that I experienced a coach, and I fell in love with the process. I loved the ability to explore with somebody where I was headed to and what were the obstacles, and see more of myself through reflection and working with them. So I went and started to learn more about coaching. I did a certificate in coaching practice, but I felt that that was just a little bit too lightweight. So I discovered the Masters of Coaching Psychology at Sydney University, and I jumped into that and started to do that with a hope that I would be able to swivel in my career, pivot in my career to learn about being an executive coach. I had a background in taxation. In fact, I'd been a partner of Deloitte for 16 years in the field of taxation. And so I was able to pivot into my second career at Deloitte as an executive coach leading our women's program. So without the basis of that education and that insight, I don't think I would have been able to achieve what I've done to date. And that's really where the interest came from.
Wow. Corinne, let's talk about your book, Be Your Own Leadership Coach. It emphasizes on self-coaching strategies, and like, how do you believe self-leadership differs from the traditional leadership sense, and what unique challenges do you think individuals face when even thinking about coaching themselves?
Well, I think the first realization is that we can all benefit by having coaching. And many of us are very fortunate to be able to sit in a room with a coach one-on-one, just like you and I are doing, or maybe sit on Zoom and have the opportunity to examine coaching issues, work through challenges, or try and build additional insights or skills. But not everybody can afford to have a coach. It's very possible logistically, it can be quite challenging to find your own coach, or financially, you might not be able to afford to have a coach. And so my thinking is, if we can actually equip people by teaching them about the principles of self-coaching, they'll be able to build their own self-coaching muscles and become stronger and wiser and learn so much more about themselves. So they won't have to wait to be in conversation with a coach, but they can actually be building out their insights in between those opportunities to have a coach. So I think it actually, the more that we can spend time building our self-coaching practices, the more we can learn about ourselves and go deeper to understand who we truly are. What do we stand for? What does it mean to be our best self, and to move towards that, so it allows us to learn much more about ourselves so we can be the leader we'd like to be. And once we can focus on understanding who we are and who we can be, we'll be much better equipped to then lead people as our best selves. And that's really what the book is about. It's giving people a series of strategies that they can put into what I call their virtual backpack. As they leave their house each day, they'll strap on their backpack. They'll virtually be able to put those strategies inside, and they'll leave their house feeling much more comforted, resourceful, much more empowered and confident as to who they can be and how they can face into the challenges in the absence of that coach. So it's bringing more equity of access to coaching strategies by providing many more people with an understanding of what coaching actually is and how they can be in support of their best self.
Yes. Corinne, like about 25 years ago, when I started my own journey of personal transformation, and I started learning about myself, and I started taking personal responsibility for everything that I created in my life. And after about 20 years, like in 2017, I wrote my first book, which was focused on self-leadership, and which was focused on helping people take responsibility for their lives. And the book was Hit Your Restart Button: How to Reinvent Yourself and Start Living a Zero Limits Life. Now, the one specific trait that I found in my journey of anyone beginning to take responsibility, I found that they need to be willing to ask powerful questions to themselves. Yes. And their willingness, openness to answer the questions, in their relationship with their coach or their mentors, or, what is that you found as one specific quality, even before people take this, dive into self-leadership, that would encourage them?
Well, I think it's to your point is not only is it taking responsibility, but it's also taking accountability for who we are and the impact that we'd like to have and how we'd like to have and achieve that. So if we even simply ask ourselves questions of how am I showing up? What's my intention today of how I'd like to have an impact? What do I need to do that will allow me to have the impact that I'm desirous of? And what will be in support of that? So what will help me? What might hinder me? So what might be the obstacles or challenges that get in the way? And by being very intentional each morning before we start our days and taking 15 minutes to set our intention for the day and take accountability for it, at the end of the day, as I close off my day for finishing my work, I can take another 15 minutes and check back in and say, okay, that was my intention. What actually happened? So what was the impact that I did have? Did it match my intention or was it quite different? And if it didn't match, let me understand why. What was in my control and what perhaps wasn't? And how did I respond? And that's building up the self-awareness. It's allowing me to take accountability for which parts of me came forward and were inside my control, but I let become outside of my control, or which parts of me were not unavailable for whatever reasons that I didn't allow them to come and support me, or what are the skills I need to further learn to enhance who I am, or what do I need to be in truth to myself to actually sit with, to better understand perhaps I'm not what I thought I was, and how can I build myself up to have that impact by gaining further support, gaining self-awareness, asking myself more questions, really opening myself up by building out that self-awareness. So I think it's about responsibility and accountability, and then being able to calibrate what is it that I'm actually achieving and doing in the impact that I'm trying to have.
Absolutely. This reminds me of, something a very long ago, I created a workshop on art of power to art of shar. The art of power, when you are reflective at the end of the day, you take stock of the situation and you calibrate yourself and you see what's going right and what's not going right. And then you plan for the next day and then you wake up in the morning and freshen up and set your intention for the day. And you take responsibility of co-creating yourself first before you dive into action.
Yes, yes. And that's why I encourage it before you start your day, because often people start their day, they turn on their laptops. The first thing they do is they jump into their emails, they start firing off emails and responding. They haven't allowed themselves any time to become present with who they are and to become much more mindful and conscious of who they are and how they are. So there's so many things in our environment which can impact how we are. There's lots of relationships that impact how we are. Our thinking or the assumptions that we hold will impact how we are. So it could be that I'm holding a whole lot of assumptions and I need to test those to determine if my intention is going to be lived out or whether my own thinking might be self-limiting and holding me back from achieving what I hope to achieve in that day. So these moments of time when we can get into practices of becoming more and more attuned with ourselves and understanding who we can be allows us then to live that through and get the support that we need to achieve the impact we'd like to have. Hopefully a positive, long-lasting impact, which is enduring in your absence.
Absolutely. Very true. Karen, with over 2,000 one-on-one coaching hours, you have a rich perspective on the intersection of coaching psychology and your lived leadership experience. Can you share an example from your own life when this really helped one of your clients or get a breakthrough or experience that transformation in your journey of personal coaching?
Oh, absolutely. If I extend from what I was just referencing in terms of the thinking. So it's too often that people will have some data points that form their thoughts, it forms their beliefs, it forms the way that they respond towards those, the behaviors, the emotions, and the cognitions. And often we find ourselves in situations where we have assumptions that have been created from the limited inferences we have, the limited data points. And it can lend ourselves to situations which can be very unpleasant. We might think that somebody's not in support of me because I'm not hearing from them, but we haven't actually got additional data to understand I'm not hearing from them because they've been unwell. They haven't been online. It's not that they're, ghosting me or not wanting to interact with me. So I might be taking myself to automatic negative thoughts and building up responses to those, as opposed to making more inquiries and testing my assumptions. So when I work with my clients and recognize that they are holding automatic negative thoughts, we work through understanding what's the impact of those? How are those creating cognitive distortions for you? So perhaps you're catastrophizing, maybe building something up to well beyond what it needs to be and causing yourself anxiety and distress and worry that doesn't need to be there. And we know if we're in that state of mind where we actually are more anxious, more worried, more negatively minded, our ability to solve complex problems is diminished. We start to look down into the darkness of the problem and not see a way out. And rather, if we take those automatic negative thoughts and we work through them to understand, well, what am I actually feeling as a result of that thinking? What is it causing me to do in terms of my behaviors? How is that helpful for what I'm trying to achieve, or how is it hindering what I'm trying to achieve? And am I creating this self-perpetuating cycle because of those automatic negative beliefs? If we can move them to a state of replacing some of that thinking with some positive enhancing thoughts, more realistic thinking, by testing some of those assumptions, by bringing their mind towards what is actually possible and true, then they're going to be able to move their state of mind to something that's lighter, something that's more positively minded, something which gives them hope and agency, so they can start to look up and out as to what is possible and how can I solve this complex problem beyond where it is today. So there are lots of studies that do show if we're in a negative state of mind, it limits our ability to solve problems. If we can move ourselves to a more balanced or positive state of mind, we have greater opportunity to have optimism and hope and engagement and connection with what we're trying to do, which allows our performance to improve and allows us to step forward. So that in itself is something that I do regularly see in terms of, and it's human nature for us to lean into the negative. You know, it's just all the soap operas we watch and the reality TV, which kind of takes us to these negative-based stories. We just consume it readily. We don't often consume a more positive enhancement of what we're doing. So it's really building out that new way of being, that new way of looking at issues and problems to try and get that balance so we don't fall into that automatic thinking and find ourselves in a distressed state.
And which is a result of you being available in the moment and you being fully present to yourself, you being fully present in the conversations, and you being fully present to the kind of questions that you're asking yourself. And as a result of which you are creating those results on the outside. And which is what I say, like, you know, even before you jump into what do I do today, the first question you need to ask is, who am I being today? And
Yes.
and who am I being in this conversation? Who am I being in this context? And that's where you set yourself, aligned inside and outside, and that's when results manifest, which are fully aligned with your core. And
absolutely, and it's more of noticing. So the more we can notice of ourselves, so rather than wait until it's too far down and then we notice, it's about having more foresight than hindsight. We don't want to wait for hindsight to come and tell us, if only you'd realized you were going to do this, if only you'd seen of yourself that you were acting this way, if only you'd heard yourself of how you were talking. If I can use foresight to notice, if I am to speak that way, the impact will likely be this. If I am to think this, then my actions will likely be this. So using more foresight than hindsight can actually better position us and notice more about where we are and how we're going to be the person we'd like to be and have the impact we'd like to have.
And what a fortunate context that we are. We have a number of coaches around and who are there to serve you, who are there to help you. And it's so easy. Like, you talk to them and they listen to your language, they listen where you're coming from, and they help you see what probably you are ignoring or avoiding or are ignorant of, and you aren't aware of them. And somebody just helps you see those spaces and helps you, in the process of course correction. And you get back onto your tracks, and it's all for you to fall in line with the results that you desire to create.
And for those times when you don't have a coach, what I'm also suggesting is that you can build techniques to help you notice more. So you can understand how you can use some of those self-coaching strategies in the absence, because we can't always get to those coaches when we need them. We can have more nuanced and deeper conversations with our coaches when we get there, but in between, We really need to be taking that accountability of asking myself more questions, of building out my self-awareness, of seeking feedback loops from other people to help me see the things that I don't see. So whether it's from trusted friends or family or colleagues, or building what I call my personal board of directors, my coach, my mentor, my advocates, my reciprocal mentor, people around me that I can have trusted relationships with who can help me see the blind spots that you were referencing there, so I can learn more about me and build my self-awareness. And when I do that, the impact's going to be much stronger, much more positive.
And how important do you think, Karen, is having a coach in the business setup for the business leaders? Because there is a tendency that they have built their own businesses and they know what they are supposed to do, and with lots of information out, like there is an attitude that we can handle this, we know business better than others, and we know our people, we have created these teams. And so the leadership, the falling into the trap of leadership which comes from authority than the leadership which comes from you as a person. So how important do you think is for business leaders to even have coaches who can help them create the results?
I think if you can access a coach, it's very important. And when you can't access a coach, then you can build up your self-coaching strategies to do so. For those who can access it, the reason why I think it's important is too often we might have great technical skills. We might know precisely what our products are or our service or our expertise. But when we become leaders in terms of the hierarchy of leadership, very rarely are people learning how to actually engage with people in a formal sense. It comes more from experience. It comes from role modeling, if you've seen of other people. Sometimes it's innate and it just comes from your own values and how you'd like to see the world. I think a coach is really important. And there's studies, actually, positive psychology, academic work, which shows that people who have a coach and a mentor are much more likely to have career opportunities that advance them more quickly than those who don't. And similarly, it also allows them to be paid at higher rates than those who don't. So the studies tell us it's in your best interest to set yourself up with that personal board of directors. But in those instances when you can't have them, it's also really important that you take action to, rather than just allow your career to happen and to feel I had no impact, I had no responsibility, I had no level of influence. We can actually influence and control a lot more than what we think of. And that's also very much in terms of the leadership impact we can have. So when I think of leadership, too often people think of leadership of those with a badge or a title that tells us who they are. It tells us they're in the C-suite or they're in management or they're a vice president. And it's really giving them a label as to what we expect from them. But that's really about positional leadership. And to my mind, everybody is a leader. We all have the ability to influence and role model to different degrees. So I can role model how I'd like to participate in a conversation. I can share my point of view. I can allow people to also respond. I can use my listening skills and role model that. I can lead the way to make it an inclusive conversation that's quite diverse. I can lead how I don't walk past the wrong behaviors, but I actually stop and talk to people about things. I can lead in the way I engage with people and make sure that I'm friendly and kind in the way I talk to people and respectful. All of this leadership allows us to therefore be our own leadership coach. We can attend to ourselves to be the best leaders we can be, regardless of the hierarchy where we sit formally in an organization. So I think whether you have a coach or not, we all have opportunity to be in a coaching opportunity with ourselves, with externals, to better ourselves, to be our best or better self.
Exactly. 6 years ago, Corinne, when I chose authentic influence as my niche, this was the very thought that made me choose this, because I realized that everybody has a potential to influence. Everybody is already influencing. And yes, you cannot not influence in any moment, because you emit the energy and you keep influencing the people around you, and you keep being influenced by the culture around. And not being aware of your own potential to influence is like you being in the dark and waiting for somebody to come and save you and somebody to come and help you. It's like, it's like forsaking your own responsibility and accountability of taking that move and taking that step and going ahead and you declaring yourself as a leader in your own life. And that is where the journey begins. And that's when I started helping people realize that you already are an influencer. And yes, and you just need a little help, and then you will know, you will have impacted hundreds of people in the next 2-3 years.
It's so true. And I love what you said about the energy, because the energy that we bring is the energy that people receive. And so even in thinking about, well, how do I want to influence people? What kind of energy am I bringing into the room or into the meeting or into the phone call? Is it something that's going to lift people and enthuse them and excite them and motivate them? Or is it dampening them because I'm feeling a little bit flat or a little bit low or disinterested? And I can attend to that. So I can actually take responsibility to think about, what will I do to try and lift myself before I move into the room or take the phone call? How do I rid myself of the frustration that's come from a different environment or a different experience that I've just had, and not put that into another space with other individuals who had nothing to do with it? So by learning coping mechanisms, by learning emotional regulation and control, by learning more about who I am and how I'm being experienced, that's really important in terms of those feedback loops, to know, well, what can I do to lift that energy at the appropriate times? Or maybe at times I need to lower the energy. Maybe I'm being too excitable, too zestful. Maybe it's distracting for people. So I need to regulate the energy so I can be more productive and effective. All of these things come in from us getting inside of ourselves and really becoming comfortable with who we are.
Absolutely, exactly. And it's not about carrying a facade of enthusiasm. It's not about carrying a facade of energy. It's about your willingness and commitment to do that deep work within, and coming from the space that you want to create for others also to participate in that body of energy. Karin, as a designer and implementer of the coaching program for women partners at Deloitte, what key insights have you gained about coaching senior women leaders to support their long-lasting, sustainable careers? And how can these insights be applied more broadly in the corporate world?
That's a lovely question. The thing that I've learned the most is how diverse the women leaders are. And so that's been my absolute pleasure, is to meet such talented women from so many different backgrounds who are coming into a professional services environment and being able to really shine with the expertise that they have, and many of them doing it in very different ways. So it's reinforced my belief that leadership is not really sitting in a box where we all have to be the same and try and respond or act like a different person or be like another person. It's about, how do you become much more in tune and authentic to who you are? So that's what I've really experienced with the vast number of women leaders that I've been working with, is they're all very different. They're all able to draw on their own strengths, their values, and honor the purpose that they have. And when they're doing that, they perform at their best. And then we also look at, well, what's the environment, the system that they're operating within? So the system these days is so complex, whether it's within the actual group that you work in an organization, or the related groups that come together and collaborate, or maybe it's external to you. You're working with clients and customers and regulators and others and governments. So how do you actually pay more attention to the system of which you're a part? How do you see yourself as not being just me, but thinking about we? And I find that the more that the individuals are able to see the systemic impact and seek help and support to navigate the system, the greater their success. So whether it's looking for advocates to work with them to help them see opportunities and have coaches and mentors, whether it's building up their level of eminence or expertise in a particular industry or with a particular insight that they might have, this is all what's lending them towards their success. So that's been quite joyful. And I can, as a curious person, I can assure you it's quite a privilege to be in conversation with these people and to learn about what they're doing and to hear and to be that reflective frame who can help them see more of themselves. That's quite an honor to actually be doing that with the vast number that I have.
And I think this curiosity is what might have inspired you into voluntary coaching. And so your involvement in voluntary coaching for Dress for Success and Bambuda Group showcases your commitment to social impact. So how do you approach coaching in these contexts differently, and what role do you see coaching playing in creating a positive social change?
I think it has a significant role because everybody in this world is in need of some level of help. It's very rare that we achieve things completely on our own without any support systems around us, whether it be support of family or friends or colleagues or community members. And so if we're able, with the skills that we have, are able to stand with others who ordinarily wouldn't have such support, it's playing a significant role in bettering their experience, helping them recognize how they can build their confidence, how they can step into different opportunities and be of support to themselves and to others, how they can have a very valuable impact in the community and the work that they'd like to do. And so I see it as essential that we lean into supporting people in a voluntary capacity. I think we all need to make space and time in whatever way we can, to whatever degree we can, to volunteer and support others who might be in need of help and support. Sometimes it's just the little things that we can do to help people. I'm fortunate I've been able to give of some more time to be working with these organisations for over 3 years. And I find it, for me, it enriches me because I'm also meeting different people in society with different experiences, different lived experiences, different needs, different concerns, and to be able to sit with them and to see them flourish at the end when they perhaps find a new job. Or in the Bambuda group, I assist C-suite leaders in not-for-profits looking at the construct of kindness. So how can we bring more kindness into the world that we're in? How do we help them set kind business objectives or have more equity and opportunities for many more people? And how do they, as business leaders, start to use that construct of kindness in the way they lead? And step by step, if we all pitch in and do our little bit, we can make this world a better place. And we can absolutely do a lot of that at the moment. There's room to bettering our world. And I think if we all just lent a little bit more into the positive way that we could help and support others, we'd find that things could take a lovely turn.
That's so brilliant, Corinne. And you also, being a partner faculty at Deloitte University Asia Pacific, you co-facilitate leadership programs for senior leaders. So how do you integrate this evidence-based coaching psychology into these programs? And honestly, what impact have you observed on participants' leadership effectiveness?
Well, the beauty of these programs is that we're working within an area where we're coming together with people who are working across the Asia Pacific region. And so from a cultural point of view, it's fabulous because you're bringing people together who can share diverse experiences, points of view, different ways of looking at the world, different home lives and environments that they've grown up in. And so by actually sharing these insights with each other, we get to have more of a global view. We get to understand each other so much more better that it makes things that we can ask the questions that we otherwise didn't know to ask, or we can start holding that curious mindset to learn more about other people's cultures or backgrounds, to better understand what's important to them and what are their needs when we're actually working with them. So this betters people's experience, not only in that moment when you're studying and learning together, but it's actually what you take back to your own home environment. And we live in such a multicultural world now, and the global world is so much smaller that we're dealing with people from so many different locations so much more often. The more that we can be empathic to each other's needs and circumstances, the better able we are to connect. We can actually make people feel like they matter, that we understand their needs, that we can actually understand how we can best support them, work together, collaborate. So that's what I find is really exciting about those opportunities when we're coming collectively together from different parts of the world and exploring and creating and learning together. We become much more innovative. Our minds go to places we otherwise wouldn't have gone. And so from that comes, some amazing impacts that we can have together. So that's what I really enjoy about that. In terms of the evidence base, there's a lot of evidence base that goes into the leadership programs that we have been working through. And many of them come from the fields of positive psychology. And I like that field because it is rich in evidence. There's a lot of academic work that goes into it. There's many studies and trials, from the qualitative all the way through to the richness of the mega type trials and the meta trials rather. And so you're able to actually present an evidence base to individuals when they're studying so that they can also critically understand and analyze the concepts that are coming through. So that, to me, I've always enjoyed, having the evidence to back things in my coaching, I appreciate that I have a theoretical base that I can also draw on, as well as coming from the heart, high in empathy and compassion, and also from the gut, my instinct as to how I coach. But I really value that theoretical base coming from the head to bring in that field of positive psychology when I'm coaching people.
And I'm really curious, how has you having coached hundreds of people actually helped in your own personal effectiveness and your personal and professional lives?
Well, I think it's really helped me reinforce my values, because I have quite strong values, which were very much shaped by my parents and their experience in their lives. And the values that I like to bring into my coaching to make it a safe space for people are those of no judgment, of respect and inclusion, making a safe space so people can feel they can bring themselves into the room and feel that they're well in support. I really love the construct of kindness. And so even in coaching, that kindness of helping people explore and just sitting with them in the moment, so that rather than jumping into mental mode where I tell them the answer and try and push my view, it's just sitting kindly with them to help them understand, or maybe asking another question or bringing something back to their attention that they might have shared with me either in that moment or earlier sessions. So there's many parts of me that have been enriched and developed since I took on a formal coaching role almost 10 years ago. And in that, I think I've become a better version of me. I've become somebody who's much more interested in other people, who really gets a lot of pleasure and joy from helping people to be of their best. And gosh, back in the early days, I'd studied law, I'd wanted to practice family law, and I really wanted to support the individuals, but I fell into the field of taxation for a long time. And there I was helping corporates, which made sense, but now it's allowed me to come back to focusing on the individual. And that to me is a great pleasure.
Absolutely. I fully agree, because in all these years of coaching, I realized that I'm a different dad, I'm a different son, I'm a different friend, I'm a different colleague, I'm a different person. And what I realized is that first and foremost, people need psychological safety, and people need space. People want to be felt heard. People want to be felt seen. And this is what happens when you are in a connection with your coach. And as a coach, when you are helping people, you are being that space. You are allowing that space for people to be themselves, and you help them start from there. It's not about you imposing your strategies, not imposing your formulae of success. Instead, you come from the understanding, the space that comes from understanding, which comes at a being level, at a human being level, and which is what helped us also as coaches evolve. And Corinne, as my next question is, like, as a steering committee member of the Institute of Coaching Asia Pacific Roundtable Series, you've been deeply involved in the coaching community. So how do you see the coaching landscape evolving in the Asia Pacific region, and what major trends and challenges do you foresee?
Oh, that's interesting. I'm no longer on that steering committee with all the commitments I had, but I did have a lovely opportunity to be involved with them. So I really enjoy the coaching community. I must say, when COVID came along, I'd suggest that many coaches lifted themselves and became much more in contact with other coaches because of the opportunity to sit together in breakouts and in Zoom meetings and have, I guess, space for us to pause to actually start learning from each other. So I personally found that my network in the coaching community grew extensively during times of COVID and has continued to grow since then. And I've really enjoyed it. So for me, I've learned a lot from other coaches. I became accredited as a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation during that time, which I loved. And because it was, again, more study, it was more interest in being much more, I guess, focused on how I was coaching, what was the standard I could lift myself to, and the like. What are the trends? I think the trends, well, they're really reflecting what's happening in the community. So trends around sustainability and how business is responding to global issues around whether it's environmental issues, sustainability, even geopolitical context as to what's happening and what do people need in support of that coaching. And of course, AI is a big issue that's coming in. How can it be used? How is it being used in the community, in the business community? But how are coaches also considering how it can be used? I haven't got my head completely around that yet, to be honest. It's still something I think, okay, I can see from a process point of view, I could do so. But I guess I'm the old school. I still like, the coaching where I'm sitting with somebody and I'm actually in conversation. So I'm still open to exploring how AI can be in support of coaching. Perhaps it's by generating insights, information, being able to provide coaches with articles or otherwise much more quickly by asking, AI to produce different types of documents. But in terms of the conversation, in terms of what's happening within, I think coaching still has an opportunity to be working through that. I don't think we're yet at a point where we've discovered precisely how it's going to impact us as coaches. There's a lot of conversation about it, though, at the moment.
And I still believe technology can give answers, but not the presence, and
yes.
Which is what only a human being can create. And
yes,
I'm still of that belief, and I have full faith in that. So let's hope we're not running against the technology. We're not going against the technology, but we can leverage it. But at the end of the day, I see the presence factor only is possible when you have life, and that's the thing about life. And Corinne, I have a question about your role as an evaluator for the International Coaching Federation's PRISM Awards. It must have given you a unique perspective also on the exceptional coaching programs globally. And so what common traits or practices do you believe distinguish the outstanding coaching programs, and how can organizations cultivate a coaching culture effectively?
That was a fabulous opportunity to do so, and the quality of the submissions were exceptional. The main thing that I think that organizations want to do is actually make sure they're not paying lip service to coaching. So just, having one or two people in the organization and saying we have a program because we have one or two, or using coaches externally who are coming in. The first thing when I talk about evidence-based is also making sure that you have accreditation with your coaches, that they're well trained, so they understand codes of conduct and codes of ethics, so that they actually can be acting in best of service to those that they're in support of, and understanding, I guess, the boundaries of coaching. I think that's really important. And for some coaches who are not trained, there can be a blurring of boundaries, which can be dangerous. And particularly because coaching can involve situations where we're on the border of mental health issues, where we might want to refer people for further support, as opposed to us giving guidance, which could be to their detriment if we don't understand what those boundaries can be. So I think the first thing is making sure that you're looking at the quality of the coaches that you have in your organization. You're looking at the ratio of coaches. So whether you're starting in a particular part of the business and starting there and looking at, well, what is the coaching program that's going to be put in place? What's the additional training that those coaches are continuing to keep the basis of their training in check and making sure that they're most relevant? And then when you're bringing things in-house, how do you actually make sure you have a program that can be scalable? Something where you can have it to the benefit. So you might have programs where people have external coaches for some parts of the organization, but then what's the ripple effect that can come from that? How can the people who are being coached also start to learn to do some elementary coaching of the individuals in their team and use constructs that can be in support if you can't afford to have coaches throughout an organization? So the best organizations are those who are dedicated to trying and improve the well-being of their team members, of their colleagues within organizations. They're realistic as to what they can afford, and they've put investment funds aside for coaching programs. So again, it does support the programs for a period of time. They actually review the programs, and they have KPIs which allow them to look at return on investment, but also qualitative data that does talk to the value that the coaching is providing. And that's often more important than the return on investment, which can be very hard to measure. And that they're actually responding to coaching needs. So they're identifying what are the needs either of the individuals or the groups, and how are we ensuring that we're designing programs which are in response to those needs to enable those people to be the best that they can be. But the more that organizations can come forward and start thinking about how do they build those skills in their organization through the use of coaches, whether it's individual, group, or team coaching, the better enabled their teams are going to be.
Could you share a success story from one of your coaches in any organizations about how this transformation and impact looks like, once an organization takes these programs seriously and sincerely?
Well, the information that we have, I don't have in front of me in terms of those the particular applications. But I guess if I did a theoretical for you, it would be more about an organization who comes from a place where they're looking at staff engagement. They're looking at the morale of the team. How motivated are people? How inspired are they? What's the discretionary effort that's coming through because people feel really connected with it? And so they're trying to move them from a place where people just come day to day to get a paycheck to a place where people feel a level of connection and meaning and wanting to feel inspired to act, to be of their best and have improved performance and move from lots of activity to productivity. So they're designing programs which might start from the top down. And often that's the best way, is actually saying, well, what do we need to do to help our more senior leaders, whether it's executive members or otherwise, understand their impact, understand how they can role model the right behaviours, understand how they can have diversity in their leadership so more people can look up and go, oh, I can see me being there one day. And how do we get coaches to help people see that, help them understand what it means to be inclusive, what it means to create psychological safety, to have a positive leadership impact? Once you start from the top down, you can then start to look at the objectives of each of the sub-businesses below it. And then, I guess, divide and conquer. How do you actually make sure that ripple effect is effective? So some of it might lend itself to facilitation or training programs. It won't always be one-on-one coaching or group or team coaching. It might be larger programs. But if you start with coaching, you're more likely for people to build out a continuum of build of self-awareness, as opposed to sitting in one training session, ticking a box that they were there and in attendance, but not really, affecting change from it. Coaching is not something that happens with results happening overnight. It does require people to build new habits, new ways of seeing things, new ways of understanding themselves and being. And just like any athlete who trains running around an oval, they're not going to get better the first time. They're going to have to keep practicing. It's the same with all of us. When we're actually going into organizations, you want to have realistic timeframes to see change. And you also, with some of those programs, want to ensure that there are other people watching for change. And the more that they have stakeholders who are watching for change, the greater the opportunity to practice the change, to exhibit the change, to get the feedback on the change. So that's going to have this lovely cyclical effect of building up that habit, building up the support that's necessary. So that's how I guess I'd be suggestive of tackling it, is making sure people aren't having just simply lone coaching sessions where nobody really understands why they're being coached, but bringing it back to the objectives of the business, bringing it back to the ripple effect of the coaching, helping to identify, see and notice the change and affirm it and give feedback and make people feel like they matter. And that will create a fabulous coaching environment where it becomes very natural for people to give feedback and get taught how to give feedback. Often people aren't very good at giving feedback. And the more we actually with coaching teach people to give feedback constructively, the more enabled people will be.
And what insights would you like to share on the impact of a coaching culture, on a direct impact on the employee well-being, and the employee well-being directly impacting the business results?
Oh, there's a huge connection. And again, there's lots of studies that demonstrate that. So the more that we're able to assist people with having a positive emotional effect, the greater the opportunities for them to be motivated and inspired and be much more engaged in the work that they do. They're much more hopeful and optimistic. And so when they're performing, their performance tends to increase. And then when that happens, the well-being of the individuals tend to increase. As leaders, our contagion of our emotions is vast. So if as a leader, if my well-being is improved and I'm in a positive emotional state, the contagion impact of that is going to ripple to the people around me. And so that can then have this cascading impact for the engagement, the morale, the quality of the work that's being done by the larger teams. that lends itself to higher profitability because people are actually being much more effective in the way they work, much more productive. There's much more collaboration, ability to innovate and have greater insights and solve technical problems. So there are many a study which demonstrate that if you are going to build a coaching culture which lends itself to improved well-being, the ripple effect of the well-being is going to lend itself to improved business performance, improved profitability, and an organisation which is much performing at a much greater rate, better rate, has continued growth.
Wonderful. Karen, my next question is on the larger perspective. Based in Sydney, Australia, like you have been actively engaged in coaching communities, and how does cultural diversity impact coaching approaches? And what advice do you have for coaches navigating cultural nuances to better connect with their clients, across the world now?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing is we keep having the theme of curiosity, but I think that's really important. Is the more curious we can be, the greater our ability to learn from each other. And so rather than feeling that I might have the answers as to how you would view the world, it's better to actually hear from you and learn from you as to how you might view the world or the problem or the issue at hand. It's also recognizing that we all carry bias. And so if we were to say, oh, no, nobody carries any bias, we're fooling ourselves. We all have been brought up in different environments with different structures, which have created and shaped the way that we view the world. And with that inherently comes some bias. So if we can have some cognizance of that bias to actually start to unpack it, as uncomfortable as it might feel, then I'm much more likely in a coaching relationship be able to respond to that bias, to allow myself to try and move from that state to one of no judgment, to one of curiosity, to one of learning, that growth mindset of what else, what more can I learn in that situation? So I think if all coaches could adopt that and recognize, geez, how multicultural we are in many, like in Australia, it's a hugely multicultural population. It's very evident that day by day you'll be working and teaming and mixing with people from all different backgrounds. So if we hold that stance, it's going to allow for greater diversity and inclusion. We'll be able to, by having conversations and questions, understand what are people's needs so that they feel that they're significant and of worth, and that they feel that they're adding value and they're of value. They feel like they matter. And if I can unpack that and notice it and affirm them, then I'm going to be much more relevant as a coach. And that comes from the beautiful work of Zach Mercurio, who wrote The Invisible Leader. And he's doing a lot of work in the field of mattering and meaning. So I'm a great fan of Zach's work. If anybody wants to read more on his work, I'd definitely suggest that they Google him and follow the research he's currently doing.
Brilliant. Now, Corinne, since you have written a book on mental toughness, what practical strategy would you recommend? And can you help us understand what mental toughness is in the first place?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question, because so often people think mental toughness is just a concept that relates to the toughest of tough, people in the army or Olympic athletes or people who are having the hardest of jobs. In fact, it doesn't mean that at all. So it's a psychological construct. It's one which allows us to deal with stresses or challenges regardless of the circumstances. And the difference between mental toughness and resilience is quite a passive response where we hope that we'll bounce back from a challenge. We'll actually return to where we were and get through it and survive. Mental toughness takes us further. It's a state of mind, and it allows us to thrive in response to a challenge. And so there's a beautiful model of mental toughness known as the 4C model of mental toughness. And it looks at your capacity to build your mental toughness by first building your resilience, looking at what you can control, your life control and emotional control. What's your level of commitment in terms of the goals? Do you like to just set goals, or do you also like to achieve the goals? Because some people love to have a whole lot of goals they wish to do, but they're not very good at achieving them. So how are you actually building up your control and commitment to build your resilience? And then how are you actually taking yourself forward to have some grit and perseverance by adding in the concept of challenge? So that comes through control, commitment, and challenge. Do you lean into a challenge when it comes your way, or do you find yourself pulling back because you're nervous and worried and uncomfortable with the challenge? And what's your level of risk orientation? Are you someone who likes a little bit of risk and is comfortable with that, or are you very worried and anxious whenever there's risk? And that can help build mental toughness. And the last piece in the puzzle is confidence. So how am I building my own self-belief and interpersonal confidence? Those are the two elements of confidence. If I don't have the answers because I maybe haven't experienced this before, how do I build out my interpersonal confidence so I can hear my voice in asking for help and support from others? And what can I do to build my own self-belief? So how do I work through perhaps those automatic negative thoughts I spoke of before to make sure I buoy myself, to hold myself with confidence rather than let myself feel concerned or lacking in that self-belief? So this model is an excellent model to look at. I was part of a group of authors who wrote the book. I'm just seeing if I've got it handy, and they're going to be most upset with me that I don't. But within this book, we looked at coaching principles. Maybe I can send you the link and you could put it in the notes.
Absolutely.
Which looked at the coaching principles of how we become much more self-aware and mindful by using mental toughness to support ourselves and to thrive through challenges rather than simply survive.
Fantastic. And it's, again, I don't know if it's serendipity or what, I have a 4C model, and which is what I give in my coaching and my programs, which is like clarity, connection, creation, and commitment. Yes. And when you come from clarity, and when you come from that deepest connection, and when you come from the real understanding of how creation works and how do you create, whether it's yourself or your business or your teams or the results that you talk about, how you create those things. And finally, which is underpinned by commitment of creating the clarity. Clarity is not something that comes from outside. It is something that exists inside when you just get out of the way.
Yes.
Yeah. And
yeah, so we could overlay the two together, because I'm hearing aspects of this 4C model which would very neatly sit with yours. And also the model does take an inner orientation with also an outward view to be able to see the why things are occurring and how we're responding. So it sounds very much aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the lighter note, you have been very passionate about baking and cooking.
Oh, look, it's I love having family around. I've got two young men who are my sons, who've grown up quickly, and they've got incredible appetites. And so I like to bake, and I also like to be in the garden. And just kind of, for me, it's a bit of peace of mind when I can actually be in nature and clearing a space in the garden and have the earth under my fingers and the sun on my face. And then similarly in the kitchen, when I'm cooking, it's that creation. It's like being centered in what you're doing and creating something that's quite beautiful and lovely and tasty. So yes, I do love to do that. The other thing I love to do is travel, and I am coming out to India for the first time, my first trip. My book, Be Your Own Leadership Coach, has been picked up by another publisher, Pan Macmillan in India, and they're publishing the book, and we're coming across late January for 2 weeks, my husband and I, for a very purposeful visit to try and speak to people about it. So that's also something I love to do. And I always thought I'd like to go to India one day, but doing so with much more of a purposeful approach to me just makes a lot of sense.
Most fantastic, and let's meet in India soon, Karen Steen, and thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was an amazing, a profoundly deep conversation that we created. Lots of value, tons of value for all the listeners that definitely are going to watch, and every bit of it was so rich with your experience and insights and your personal, the examples that you shared. And truly, we understand how impactful is self-leadership to create yourself, your company, your business, your teams, and the results that you desire. Thank you so much, Karen Steen, for being on this show. We really enjoyed talking to you, and I wish you all the best. And we welcome Be Your Own Leadership Coach to India.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much, and namaste from India.
Thank you.